My name is Scott Wiebe, and I am the Director of Outreach Services for MDA, and we're happy to have a series of public WebExes. This is the second installment in our series of public WebExes. That's how we roll, living independently with a neuromuscular disease. Also assisting me in facilitating from the MDA side of things is Annie Kennedy, our Vice President of Advocacy, and a guest panel. Annie, would you mind introducing our guest panel here today?
I'd be glad to. So welcome everybody to this call this evening. We thank you for being on it. For the purposes of respecting everybody's time, we will keep this call this evening to an hour. We are hoping to have some time for question and answer. So there is a dialog box on everybody's computer screen. If you have any questions, please type your question into the dialog box, and we will try and save some time to answer them at the end. If for some reason we are unable to get to all of the questions, we will be posting this WebEx that is being recorded on MDA's website along with the question and answer section. So any questions that are not answered on this call tonight will be answered and posted along with this WebEx. So without further delay, I would love to introduce our panelists. This evening's topic actually was the result of a conversation that started during our previous public WebEx, and the previous public WebEx was about selecting a college or making plans for secondary and post-secondary education. And during that, the topic of living independently and managing a personal care attendant came up. And so out of that bloomed this topic this evening. So the topic this evening was entitled, That's How We Roll, Living Independently with a Neuromuscular Disease. And we're delighted to have three experts serving as our panelists this evening. The first is serving as our guest host, and that's Angela Wrigglesworth. Angela is a member of MDA's National Task Force on Public Awareness. She is a third-grade teacher in the Houston area. She graduated from Texas A&M University for her undergraduate degree and then received her master's degree about a year ago. When she was in college, she was the college's first student using a wheelchair to take part in the sorority rush program. She has lived both on campus and now has her own home, and I'm sure she'll talk more about that. And Angela was diagnosed with SMA type 2 as an infant. Joining Angela this evening are Katrina Gossett and Vance Taylor. Katrina is an associate practicing business litigation at Baker & Daniels in Indianapolis. She graduated with a BA from Notre Dame and attended the University of Chicago Law School. Katrina lives in downtown Indianapolis, which she'll talk a bit about also, with her roommate and her service dog. She uses a power wheelchair and also was diagnosed with SMA as a young girl. And last but certainly not least is Vance Taylor. Vance is also a member of MDA's National Task Force on Public Awareness. He is a principal at the D.C. Government Affairs business development firm Catalyst Partners. He has a master's degree in Homeland Security and received his undergraduate degree from Brigham Young, and works closely on Homeland Security issues here in Washington. And so with no further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Angela, who's going to take it from there.
Thank you so much, Annie. I'd like to start out tonight's discussion by saying that some form of independence is attainable for all. And I often hear people with disabilities saying that they can't do something because they are, for lack of a better term, too disabled. But I just have so much trouble with that statement for many reasons, but mainly because there are millions of things that each of us can't do. And we could spend this entire hour and on to into next week talking about all of our I can'ts. And in order to be independent, one must focus on their I cans. And so I'd like to start by telling you my I cans. And I am a Southern diva, so that means I smile a lot, I eat a lot, and I wear a lot of makeup. And luckily for me, those are my three I cans. I can brush my teeth, I can feed myself, and I can put on my makeup. And those are my I cans, the ones that I can do by myself. There's just three of them. And other than that, every other I can that I have, such as I can hold down a full-time job and I can have a social life, each of those I cans involves someone else. And tonight, the three of us intend to help you to figure out what your I cans are so that you can decide how you roll when it comes to living independently. Next slide, please. The four things, the topics that we're going to talk about tonight are these four that you're seeing on the screen now. Am I ready to live independently? Have you thought about the obstacles that you'll face and how to overcome them. What does it mean to be independent? For each of us, that means something different. For some, that means living in an apartment close to home. For others, it means literally moving across the country. Do I still have the skills needed? Do I have the skills needed to live independently? Meaning such things as, do you know how to ask for help, and can you verbalize your needs to someone else? Do I have the right support network needed to live independently? In other words, do I have the right people and the resources in my life to make this happen? Next slide, please. Okay, Vance is going to help us to better understand some of the funding available for independent living and then discuss the obstacles that may challenge the process of living independently. So, Vance?
Thank you very much. I'm pretty much just going to talk about what it says at the top here, funding options and obstacles. Part of this is in making this transition, if you're thinking about making the transition to independent living or looking to enhance your independence, part of it is a mental change as well, and that is maybe sometimes an obstacle in that it's a different mindset. You know, I start here by saying there's only one mom, and that's, you know, my mom was my care attendant for the majority of my life, and she'd wake me up and she had a smile and I had a nice morning hug, and there was a lot of love there, and she didn't ever charge me or invoice me. She essentially worked or served out of love, and so I put, you know, families work for free, and that's something that over time sometimes we take for granted. And when you go and make that jump to independent living, you're bringing in a PCA, a care attendant essentially. You need to remember that that person's likely not going to be your family member. And so they're there because they need to provide an income for their own situation or their own family. And so you're the job. And that's not to say that you won't develop great relationships with some of your care attendants. Some of the attendants that I've had over the years are lifelong friends. I had several that were in my wedding line with me. But you always have to remember at the root of it, this is a job for them, and so you need to recognize and accept that difference. In terms of obstacles, some of the obstacles are that you're gonna go somewhere, and you may not know how people get along. For example, I was living in California. I had this crazy idea that I wanted to move out to Washington, D.C. I had an internship opportunity with a member of Congress, and I knew I wanted to take advantage of it, but I also knew that I couldn't get myself out of bed, I couldn't dress myself, I couldn't drive myself places, and I didn't know anybody in Washington, D.C. And so in thinking about how I was going to make that work, my mother, whom I was talking to about this, made a wonderful observation, which was, you're not going to be the only disabled person in D.C. Why don't you make contact with the disabled community, and then you can ask questions. You can find out, how do you do it? What services are available in these areas? Because different communities have different services available. Sometimes to help you pay for care attendants. Sometimes you can take advantage of programs through the Department of Vocational Rehab. Other times you can take advantage of other government or state or local programs. But the only way to find out about those are to go right to the people that are taking advantage of those services. Because there's no, as much as we'd like to have one, yellow book or special newspaper that says, these are all the great care attendant services. So you have to ask the people that are most likely to know, and that's the people that are being served by those programs. And the wonderful thing about the MDA community is I didn't have to know anybody in D.C. other than the phone number for the local MDA office. Because when you're with the MDA, we say it's a family, and it's true. Annie and company and others have oftentimes helped put me in contact with people that can answer my questions. Ask questions, be candid, find out how others are living on their own and how they're affording to pay for their care attendants. I have in here, explore the marketplace. And part of why I say that is because you just have to do your homework in that what constitutes competitive pay for a care attendant in San Francisco might vary from what constitutes good or competitive pay in North Carolina or North Dakota or Florida. And so you just have to look at what's the cost of living in your area, what are people currently paying their care attendants. You don't want to overpay, but you also don't want to underpay. And so you can compare and contrast what people are being paid, and also as you look to live independently and you look to hire a care attendant, you'll find that there's typically two groups of folks that will apply. Some are going to apply and they're going to say, I have all these qualifications and certifications, and so I'm going to charge a very high amount of money because I have these certifications. Others will say, I don't really have certifications, but I'm willing to help, willing to do what I can, and so they will charge less. Depending on what your level of care is required, you may or may not want to go with somebody that is a, quote, professional in the healthcare industry. The vast majority of the care attendants that I've had have not had healthcare backgrounds. They've been individuals that were reliable, that were teachable, and that were looking to have some sort of supplementary income. Let's go to the next slide. Identify your healthcare costs. The fact of the matter is, living with a disease, living with any physical challenge, it gets expensive real quick. And that's unfortunate. Some might look and say, well, it's not fair. Not only are you dealing with a physical disability, but you're also looking at increased living costs. And what I would respond is, you're right, it's not fair, but it is what it is. And so you have to be very cognizant of what it takes to live independently. Insurance, so you're going to be paying for your own insurance? Is that going to be covered through a job? Medical supplies? What gets covered even if you are insured? Specialized transportation, care attendants, all these things you need to take into account, how much this costs. Understand what it costs to be independent, and then identify your own financial realities. Is there a gap between your income and what you're receiving in terms of government services or state or local services and your expenses? And if so, how are you gonna get over that? One of the things that I would recommend anybody do that's looking to have a personal care attendant and that's particularly struggling with the financial component or aspects of it is to look at different structures. In one area of the world, it might make sense to pay an hourly rate. It might make sense to pay a salary. Sometimes I've seen people that didn't pay any salary at all, but offered rather room and housing. So in D.C., for example, housing is very, very expensive. So sometimes my saying, I will give you a room and you can stay there, and in return you will care for my needs, is a much better financial deal or arrangement for the care attendant than it is for me. And since, or rather, it's a better financial arrangement for them than it would be for me to pay them what I could afford to pay them, because the cost of the room is so much more. And for me, that works out great because obviously, cash is limited, and if you're already renting a place that maybe has a room for one extra person, then it sort of works out great. Lastly, just in terms of options and obstacles, I would want you to think long term. What's your current earning power? Figure it out. Here's what I can make. These are the type of jobs I'm currently qualified for. And then look down the road. What's your future financial earning power? If you're going to college and you're studying something that is an unemployable field, then your earning power for the future is going to be limited.